The stars above Eden's Gate had always been beautiful. The colony world sat at the edge of known space. Far from the busy trade routes and political games of the Galactic Council, it was a simple place where families built homes, farmers grew crops, and children played in fields of golden wheat that stretched toward distant mountains. Daniel Harris had visited Eden's Gate once, 3 years before he became a commander in the Earth Defense Fleet. He remembered the smell of fresh bread from the bakeries, the sound of laughter in the town squares, and the way the sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was the kind of place people dreamed about when they thought of starting over. Now, as he stood on the bridge of his ship and watched the distress signal flash across his screen, he felt his blood turn cold. The message was broken and full of static. A woman's voice, terrified and desperate, spoke between bursts of interference. She said the sky was on fire. She said ships had appeared from nowhere and started bombing the cities. She said people were running, but there was nowhere to go. Then the message cut off, and there was only silence. Daniel ordered his fleet to maximum speed. They pushed their engines beyond safe limits, burning through fuel reserves that would take months to replace. Every minute felt like an hour. Every second stretched into eternity. He kept telling himself they would make it in time. He kept telling himself there would be survivors. When they finally arrived at Eden's Gate, Daniel understood that hope was a cruel thing. The planet that had once been green and blue was now black and gray. Smoke rose from the surface in thick columns that reached toward space. The cities were gone. The farms were gone. The forests and rivers and mountains were buried under ash and debris. 40,000 people had lived on Eden's Gate. 40,000 men, women, and children who had done nothing wrong except build homes on a world that someone else decided they wanted. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the first ship to enter the atmosphere. She was a veteran of 12 years in the fleet, hardened by battles and trained to keep her emotions in check. But as her ship descended through the smoke and she saw what remained of the colony, tears streamed down her face. There were no survivors. The Vekthari had been thorough. Their orbital bombardment had targeted not just military positions or government buildings, but schools, hospitals, and residential areas. They had hunted down evacuation shuttles and destroyed them before they could escape. They had turned a peaceful world into a graveyard. Lisa walked through the ruins of what had once been the main settlement. Her boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. She found toys half buried in the rubble. She found family photographs scattered in the wind. She found a small shoe, pink with white laces, lying alone in the middle of a crater. She picked up the shoe and held it in her hands. It was so small. It had belonged to a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, a little girl who had probably laughed and played and dreamed of growing up to do wonderful things. Now she was gone, along with everyone else who had called this place home. Back on the ship, Daniel received a broadcast from the Vekthari commander. Warlord Thexvoran appeared on the screen, his reptilian face twisted into an expression of smug satisfaction. He spoke in a deep, rumbling voice that carried centuries of arrogance. He claimed that humanity had encroached upon sacred Vekthari territory. He said the attack was justified under ancient laws that humans were too primitive to understand. He warned that any species foolish enough to challenge the Vekthari would meet the same fate. Daniel listened to every word. He recorded the message and saved it to his personal files. Then he turned off the screen and sat alone in his quarters, staring at the wall. The Galactic Council held an emergency session 3 days later. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral world of Centrum. They debated and argued and made speeches about the tragedy at Eden's Gate. Ambassador Susan Bell represented humanity at the session. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, known for her patience and diplomatic skill. She presented evidence that Eden's Gate had been legally settled under council regulations. She showed star charts proving the colony was nowhere near Vekthari space. She played recordings of the distress calls and displayed images of the destruction. The council listened politely. Then they voted. The result was what Susan had feared but expected. The council declared the attack a territorial dispute and refused to take action. Several species argued that getting involved would set a dangerous precedent. Others simply did not want to anger the Vekthari. who controlled valuable trade routes. A few privately admitted they did not care what happened to humans, a young species that had only been part of galactic society for 60 years. Susan returned to Earth with the news. She met with Admiral Kevin Brooks at the Lunar Command Center, where the highest-ranking officers of the Earth Defense Fleet had gathered. The room was silent as she explained the Council's decision. Kevin was 62 years old. He had spent his entire adult life protecting humanity, first as a soldier, then as a commander, and finally as the admiral in charge of all military operations. He had seen death and destruction in many forms. He had made hard choices and lived with the consequences. But as he listened to Susan describe how the galaxy had turned its back on 40,000 murdered civilians, something changed inside him. The part of him that had always believed in diplomacy and cooperation and peaceful solutions grew quiet. In its place, something older and darker began to wake. He looked around the room at the faces of his officers. He saw the same cold fury in their eyes. He saw grief transformed into determination. He saw a species that had been pushed too far. Kevin stood up and walked to the window. Earth hung in the black sky, blue and green and beautiful. Somewhere down there, families were learning that their loved ones would never come home. Somewhere down there, children were crying for parents who had been turned to ash. He turned back to his officers and spoke in a voice that was calm and steady and absolutely certain. They wanted to see what humanity is capable of, he said. Let's show them. No one disagreed. No one asked questions. They simply nodded and began to plan. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had confused human kindness for weakness. They had assumed that because humans preferred peace, they were incapable of war. They were about to learn the truth. 6 months passed after the massacre at Eden's Gate. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like humanity had accepted its fate. Human ships stopped appearing in busy trade hubs. Human diplomats spoke quietly at council meetings, never raising their voices or making demands. Human colonies increased their security but took no aggressive actions. The Vekthari celebrated their victory. Warlord Texvoren gave speeches about the weakness of humans, calling them soft creatures who cared more about comfort than honor. He displayed trophies taken from Eden's Gate, including the flag that had flown over the colony's main settlement. Other species laughed at his jokes and congratulated him on teaching the young race a lesson. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, representatives from ancient civilizations shook their heads and spoke about humans in the past tense. They said it was sad but predictable. They said humans had expanded too quickly and needed to be reminded of their place. They said the universe was harsh and only the strong survived. None of them knew what was really happening. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in tunnels that had been dug in secret over the past decade, thousands of workers labored around the clock. They built ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These vessels were smaller and faster than standard designs, equipped with engines that could cross vast distances in hours instead of days. Their hulls were coated with materials that absorbed sensor signals, making them nearly invisible to detection systems. Dr. Maria Santos led the research team responsible for the new technology. She was 45 years old, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Before the massacre, she had been working on theoretical physics, writing papers that few people read. Now, she was building weapons. The breakthrough had come from studying wreckage of Vekthari ships that had been collected over the years. Maria discovered that all Council species used the same basic shield technology, a system that had remained unchanged for thousands of years because no one had bothered to improve it. The shields were strong against known weapons but had a critical weakness. Energy delivered at certain frequencies could pass through them like water through a net. Maria designed new weapons that exploited this weakness. She called them phase cannons, and in testing, they cut through the strongest shields in seconds. She also developed communication systems that operated on frequencies the Council had never used, allowing human ships to coordinate without anyone listening. While Maria worked on technology, Amy Peterson worked on information. She was 38 years old, plain-looking and easily forgotten, which made her perfect for her job. As the head of human intelligence operations, She had spent the last 6 months building a network of spies across the galaxy. Human traders traveled to Vecthari worlds, selling goods at low prices and asking innocent questions. Human mechanics found jobs repairing ships at busy space stations, copying data from navigation computers when no one was watching. Human diplomats attended boring parties and listened to drunk officials reveal secrets they should have kept. Amy collected every piece of information and assembled it into a complete picture. She knew the location of every Vecthari military base. She knew the patrol routes of their fleets. She knew the codes to their communication systems and the names of the officers who commanded their ships. She knew the layout of Warlord Thexvoran's palace, including which doors had guards and which windows faced the gardens. She also knew something else, something that made Admiral Kevin Brooks decide the time for waiting was over. The Vecthari were planning to attack 3 more human colonies. They had chosen their targets and set their dates. They expected no resistance because they believed humans were too afraid to fight back. General Chris Taylor received this information on a cold morning in January. He was 60 years old, built like a bear, with a voice that could shake walls when he raised it. He had commanded ground forces for 30 years and had never lost a battle he intended to win. He looked at the intelligence reports and nodded slowly. Then he began the largest military mobilization in human history. Every shipyard on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies shifted to military production. Factories that had made consumer goods started making ammunition. Universities fast-tracked students through engineering and medical programs. Training camps expanded to handle the flood of volunteers who arrived every day. The draft was never activated because it was never needed. People came forward on their own, driven by grief and anger and the simple desire to protect their families. Parents who had lost children, children who had lost parents, friends and neighbors and strangers united by a common cause. The recruitment offices had to turn people away because there were not enough positions for everyone who wanted to serve. Lisa Morgan spent those months training pilots. She pushed them harder than anyone had been pushed before, running simulations until they could fly their ships blindfolded. She taught them tactics that no one in the galaxy had ever seen, maneuvers designed to exploit the weaknesses Maria had discovered. She also visited the memorial that had been built on Earth, a wall of stone engraved with 40,000 names. She stood there for hours, reading the names of people she had never met, but would never forget. She made them a promise that she intended to keep. Daniel Harris commanded the construction of the new fleet. He oversaw every detail, from the weapons systems to the crew quarters. He named the fleet himself, choosing a word that captured everything humanity was feeling: vengeance. The ships were beautiful in a terrible way. Their hulls were black as midnight, designed to blend with the darkness between stars. Their engines burned blue and silent, leaving no trail for enemies to follow. Their weapons were hidden behind panels that would open only when it was time to fire. When the last ship was complete, Daniel gathered the commanders of every vessel in the fleet. They met in a great hall on the lunar base, thousands of officers standing at attention. He walked among them, looking into their faces and seeing the same determination he felt in his own heart. He told them what they were about to do. He explained the risks and the costs. He made clear that some of them would not return. Then he asked if anyone wanted to withdraw. No one moved. No one spoke. They simply stood there, waiting for the order they had been preparing for. Admiral Kevin Brooks arrived to give the final briefing. He displayed a holographic image of the Vecthari homeworld, a planet called Thexvera that orbited a red star in the heart of enemy space. It was heavily defended, surrounded by fleets and protected by orbital weapons platforms. The Council would have said an attack was impossible. The Council would have been wrong. Kevin revealed the plan. Human operatives had already infiltrated Thexvara, posing as traders and workers. They were in position to disable the orbital defense grid at the exact moment the fleet arrived. The phase cannons would handle the warships, the ground forces would capture the leadership, and the civilians would be left unharmed. He emphasized that last point. This was not revenge. This was justice. There was a difference, and humanity would prove it to the galaxy. When the briefing ended, the officers returned to their ships. Engines powered up across the fleet. Navigation systems locked onto their target. And in the silence of space, humanity began to move. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans were pushed too far, they did not break, they did not bend, they pushed back. The night sky above Thexvara was filled with 3 moons that cast silver light across the capital city. Millions of Vekthari slept peacefully in their homes, secure in the knowledge that their world was the most heavily defended planet in the sector. Orbital weapons platforms circled above them. Warship fleets patrolled nearby space. Sensor networks monitored every approach route for light years in all directions. Warlord Thexvoran slept in his palace at the center of the city. His bedroom was decorated with trophies from conquered worlds, including the flag from Eden's Gate that hung above his bed. He dreamed of future victories, of more species that would learn to fear the Vekthari name. He did not know that 12 human operatives were already inside his palace walls. They had arrived separately over the past 3 months. Some posed as merchants selling exotic goods, others claimed to be engineers with skills the Vekthari needed. One had even gotten a job in the palace kitchen, preparing meals that the warlord ate without suspicion. At exactly midnight, local time, they moved. The first operative, a woman named Amy Peterson, entered the command center through a maintenance tunnel she had mapped weeks earlier. 2 guards stood at their stations, watching screens that showed nothing unusual. She neutralized them silently and sat down at the main console. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision, entering codes she had stolen from a Vekthari officer who talked too much at parties. The orbital defense grid went offline. Warning systems that should have screamed alarms went silent. Communication networks that connected the military command to the fleet above were quietly redirected to empty channels. The Vekthari had no idea their shields were down. In the darkness between stars, the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. 147 ships appeared where seconds before there had been nothing. They did not announce themselves. They did not send warnings. They simply arrived and began their attack. Commander Daniel Harris led the first wave. His ship, the Vengeance, dove toward the nearest Vekthari warship, with engines burning bright. The enemy vessel tried to raise shields, but the phase cannons were already firing. Blue beams of light cut through the hull like knives through paper. Secondary explosions tore the ship apart from within. The battle in orbit lasted less than 20 minutes. Vekthari captains screamed orders into communication systems that did not respond. They fired weapons at targets they could barely see, hitting nothing but empty space. Human ships moved between them like ghosts, striking and vanishing before anyone could react. Captain Lisa Morgan commanded the assault on the orbital platforms. Her squadron approached from angles the Vekthari had never considered, exploiting blind spots that Amy's intelligence had identified. The platforms were designed to defend against attacks from space, not from ships that came so close they were practically touching the hulls. Lisa gave the order, and her pilots fired. The platforms died one by one, their weapons falling silent, their lights going dark. Debris rained down toward the planet below, burning up in the atmosphere like falling stars. On the surface, General Chris Taylor led the ground assault. Drop ships descended through the smoke and fire, carrying soldiers who had trained for this moment for 6 months. They landed in the heart of the capital city, surrounding the palace before anyone understood what was happening. The palace guards fought back. They were elite warriors, chosen for their strength and loyalty. But they had never faced an enemy like this. Human soldiers moved with terrifying efficiency, covering each other with precision that came from endless practice. They did not waste ammunition. They did not make mistakes. They simply advanced, room by room, floor by floor. Chris led the team that breached the warlord's personal chambers. They found Thexvoran awake and dressed in battle armor, a ceremonial blade in his hands. He roared a challenge and charged at the human soldiers, expecting to die with honor in combat. Chris shot the blade out of his hand. 2 soldiers tackled him to the ground. A third secured his wrists with restraints designed to hold creatures twice his strength. Lisa Morgan arrived minutes later. She walked into the chamber and stood over the fallen warlord. Looking down at the creature who had ordered the death of 40,000 innocent people, she held something in her hand, a small pink shoe with white laces that she had carried with her since Eden's Gate. She did not speak. She simply showed him the shoe and let him understand what it meant. Outside the palace, the battle was ending. Vekthari, military units across the planet surrendered as they realized their leadership had fallen. Communication channels filled with human voices broadcasting messages in the Vekthari language, explaining what had happened and ordering all forces to stand down. But then something unexpected occurred. Something that would change how the galaxy remembered this day. Human soldiers began distributing food and medical supplies to Vekthari civilians. They set up aid stations in public squares. They helped injured people reach hospitals. They protected shops and homes from looters. A Vekthari mother approached a human soldier, clutching her child in her arms. She was terrified, certain that she and her baby would be killed just as the humans had been killed at Eden's Gate. The soldier looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a ration bar, handing it to her with a gentle smile. "We are not here to hurt you," he said in careful Vekthari. "We are here for the ones who gave the orders." Word spread quickly. Human soldiers were helping civilians. Human medics were treating wounded Vekthari. Human engineers were restoring power to hospitals and water treatment plants. The conquerors were acting like saviors. General Chris Taylor addressed the population through captured broadcast systems. He explained that humanity had come for justice, not revenge. He said the people of Thexvara were not their enemies. He promised that no civilian would be harmed as long as they remained peaceful. Some Vekthari did not believe him. They expected the mercy to end, expected the humans to reveal their true nature and begin the slaughter. But hours passed, and no slaughter came. Days passed, and the humans kept their word. Daniel Harris walked through the streets of the capital as the sun rose over a conquered world. He saw human soldiers sharing meals with Vekthari families. He saw children cautiously approaching the strange beings who had defeated their military in a single night. He thought about Eden's Gate, about the ash and silence, and the shoe that Lisa still carried. He thought about what it would have meant if the Vekthari had shown the same mercy to human civilians. The entire operation had taken 72 hours. The greatest military power in the sector had been defeated. Their leader had been captured. Their fleet had been destroyed. And not a single Vekthari civilian had been intentionally harmed. News of the assault spread across the galaxy within days. Traders carried stories from system to system. News networks broadcast footage that human operatives had released. The message was clear and impossible to ignore. Humanity had proven that they could be monsters if they chose. They had also proven that they chose not to be. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. For the first time in living memory, they were afraid. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were made of stone quarried from a dozen worlds, each block representing a species that had joined the union of civilizations. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the dome. Its floor could hold representatives from 300 different races, all gathered to debate the fate of the galaxy. Today, for the first time anyone could remember, the hall was silent. Ambassador Susan Bell walked toward the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. She was a small woman, surrounded by beings 3 times her size. Creatures with claws and fangs and armor-plated skin. Any of them could have killed her with a single blow. None of them moved. The holographic displays around the chamber showed images from Thexvara. Burning warships. Captured military bases. Warlord Thexvoran in restraints. Being led away by human soldiers, the delegates watched with expressions ranging from shock to terror to something that might have been respect. Susan reached the platform and activated her speaking crystal. Her voice filled the hall, calm and measured despite the chaos that swirled around her. She began with the evidence. She showed star charts proving that Eden's Gate had been legally settled in unclaimed space. She displayed recordings of the Vekthari attack, including the distress calls from civilians begging for help that never came. She presented documentation of the Council's vote 6 months earlier, the vote that had declared the massacre a mere territorial dispute. The delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them had cast those votes. Some of them had laughed at the humans afterward. Susan showed them something else. Intelligence reports proving that the Vekthari had planned to attack 3 more human colonies. Names and dates had been collected by human operatives, confirmed by captured Vekthari officers. 40,000 dead had not been enough. They had wanted more. High Counselor Xyrith rose from his elevated seat. He was ancient, even by galactic standards. A towering figure with silver scales and eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. "By what authority," he demanded, "did humanity launch this assault? The Council did not sanction military action. You have violated the charter that governs all member species." Susan looked up at him without flinching. She was silent for a long moment, letting the question hang in the air. Then she answered, "By the authority of 40,000 dead civilians whose only crime was building homes and raising families. By the authority of children who burned in their beds while you debated jurisdiction. By the authority of mothers who watched their babies die while you discussed trade routes and political implications." Her voice grew harder, though she never raised it. "You had 6 months to deliver justice. We came to you with evidence. We begged for intervention. We followed every rule and procedure this council has established. And what did we receive in return? Dismissal, indifference, laughter." She activated another display. A recording played of Vekthari delegates mocking human representatives in the corridors after the vote. They had not known anyone was recording. "You abandoned us," Susan said. "So we delivered justice ourselves." The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted accusations and threats. Some demanded immediate sanctions against humanity. Others called for military response. For fleets to be assembled and sent to teach the humans a lesson they would never forget. Susan stood quietly at the center of the storm, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, she spoke again. "You speak of punishment. You speak of teaching us lessons. Let me show you something." She activated a new display. It showed a map of the galaxy with small blue dots marking the positions of human ships. There were dots near Thexvara, which everyone expected, but there were also dots elsewhere, near the homeworld of the Krix, who had voted against intervention, near the colonies of the Ven, who had mocked human weakness, near the strategic bases of the Thornari, who had supplied weapons to the Vekthari, not attacking, not threatening, just present, waiting. "We remember every vote," Susan said quietly. "Every dismissal. Every species that laughed while our people died. We are not here to threaten you. We are here to remind you that humanity does not forget." Admiral Kevin Brooks appeared on a holographic display beside her. He was aboard his flagship, surrounded by officers who had just won the fastest military victory in galactic history. "We did not come to conquer," he said. "We came to send a message. Humanity will not be slaughtered in silence. We will not beg for protection that never comes. And we will never forget those who stood by and watched." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Vekthari civilians on Thexvara are safe. We have harmed no one who did not carry a weapon against us. We have restored essential services and provided humanitarian aid to populations that our enemy would have left to starve. This is who we are. This is what we do." His voice hardened. "But let me be absolutely clear. If anyone attacks human civilians again, we will respond. Not with requests for council intervention. Not with diplomatic protests. With everything we have, and next time, we will not stop until there is nothing left to threaten us." Silence fell across the chamber once more. High Counselor Xyrith stared at the map showing human fleet positions. He was old enough to remember when his own species had been young and aggressive, when they had believed strength was the only thing that mattered. He recognized what he was seeing. He understood the message. Humanity had proven they could strike anywhere, at any time, with devastating effect. They had also proven they could show mercy, something the Vekthari would never have done. They were offering a choice. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Susan turned to face him directly. "Justice for Eden's Gate. Warlord Thexvoran will be tried for his crimes. The Vekthari military will be dismantled. Reparations will be paid to the families of the dead." She paused. "And the council will reform its policies. No more looking away when civilians are massacred. No more declaring genocide a territorial dispute. When innocents die, there must be consequences, for everyone." The delegates murmured among themselves. What she was asking would change everything. It would mean that powerful species could no longer prey on weaker ones, without fear of response. Susan had one more thing to say. Humanity has been part of galactic civilization for 60 years. In that time, we have tried to be good members of this community. We have traded fairly. We have kept our promises. We have respected the laws and traditions of species far older than ourselves. She looked around the chamber at the faces staring down at her. But we have also learned something important. Kindness without strength is weakness. Peace without justice is surrender. We will continue to be the humans you have known, friendly and curious and eager to learn. But we will also be something more. She stood a little straighter. We will be the species that protects its own. No matter the cost. No matter the enemy. If you remember nothing else from this day, remember that. The vote that followed was not unanimous. Several species opposed the reforms, arguing that they infringed on sovereignty. But when they looked at the map showing human fleet positions, when they remembered the speed and precision of the assault on Thexvara, most of them reconsidered. The new doctrine passed by a margin that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Attacks on civilian populations would be met with unified response. No exceptions. No excuses. Ambassador Susan Bell left the chamber with her head held high. She had come to deliver a message, and she had delivered it. Behind her, the Galactic Council began the slow process of becoming something better than it had been. And across the galaxy, in every council, chamber, and military base and trading post, a new understanding began to take root. Humans were not the soft, weak creatures everyone had assumed. They were something far more dangerous. They were kind until kindness stopped working. Then they were unstoppable. 1 year had passed since the assault on Thexvara. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Warlord Thexevaran sat in a small cell on a frozen moon at the edge of human space. The room was bare except for a bed, a toilet, and a screen that covered one wall. The screen played recordings of Eden's Gate on an endless loop. Faces of the dead, names of families, images of the peaceful world his forces had destroyed. He was forced to watch every day. This was his punishment, chosen specifically by the human tribunal that had found him guilty of crimes against civilization. Death would have been mercy. This was something else. Some called it cruel. Others called it justice. The families of the 40,000 dead called it barely enough. The Vecthari Dominion existed in name only. Their military had been dismantled. Their warships converted to cargo vessels. Their weapons factories shut down. A joint human council force maintained peace on their worlds, ensuring that no one sought revenge on either side. What happened next surprised everyone, including the humans. Many Vecthari citizens, especially those in the lower classes who had suffered under their own military government, expressed gratitude toward their conquerors. Human soldiers had treated them with kindness when their own leaders would have sacrificed them without thought. Human engineers had rebuilt infrastructure that Vecthari officials had neglected for generations. A movement began among young Vecthari, calling for permanent alliance with humanity. They pointed out that humans had shown more concern for Vecthari civilians in 3 days than Vecthari leadership had shown in 3 centuries. The movement grew slowly but steadily, planting seeds that would bear fruit for decades to come. The Galactic Council offered humanity a permanent seat among the highest governing body. It was an honor that species usually waited centuries to receive. Ambassador Susan Bell accepted on one condition. 3 other species will join us, she said. The Fenari, the Costa, and the Delan. All of them have been considered too small, too weak, too insignificant to matter. All of them have suffered at the hands of larger powers. They deserve a voice too. The council debated for 3 days before agreeing. Susan smiled when she heard the news. This was what she had been working toward from the beginning. Not just power for humanity, but fairness for everyone. Dr. Maria Santos continued her research on Earth, no longer working in secret. Her laboratory received funding from across human space, and she published papers that scientists from a dozen species studied with amazement. Her phase cannon technology was offered to council peacekeeping forces. ensuring that no single power could dominate through military strength alone. She also developed something else. Something she considered far more important. Medical technology adapted from her weapons research allowed doctors to treat injuries that had been considered untreatable. She donated the patents freely, refusing to profit from discoveries that could save lives. When asked about her choice, she said simply, "We proved we can destroy. Now we have to prove we can heal." General Chris Taylor retired from active service and returned to Earth. He bought a small house near the coast and spent his days fishing and watching the sunset. But once a year, he made a pilgrimage to a place that had become sacred to all of humanity. Eden's Gate was no longer a burned wasteland. In the years since the massacre, engineers had worked to restore the planet. The ash had been cleared. New soil had been brought in, seeds had been planted, and trees had begun to grow. At the center of what had once been the main settlement stood a memorial garden. 40,000 flowers bloomed there, one for each life that had been lost. Paths wound between them, leading to a wall of polished stone where every name was carved in letters that would never fade. Chris walked those paths alone, reading names he had memorized long ago. He spoke to them sometimes, telling them about the justice that had been delivered in their memory. He hoped they could hear him, wherever they were. Captain Lisa Morgan took command of the Resolute Dawn, which became the flagship of Earth's peacekeeping fleet. Her mission was to patrol the borders of human space and respond to emergencies wherever they occurred. She ran her ship with the same discipline she had shown during the war, but she also made time for something else. In her quarters, displayed in a case of clear crystal, sat a small pink shoe with white laces. She had carried it with her since Eden's Gate. A reminder of why she fought. Now it served a different purpose. When young officers joined her crew, she showed them the shoe and told them its story. "This belonged to a little girl," she would say. "She never got to grow up. She never got to fall in love or have children of her own. She was killed because powerful people decided her life did not matter." She would look into their eyes, making sure they understood. "Our job is to make sure it never happens again. To anyone, anywhere. That is why we serve." Commander Daniel Harris received promotion after promotion until he became the youngest admiral in the history of the Earth Defense Fleet. He could have had any assignment he wanted, any ship in the Navy. He chose to return to the place where everything had begun. A new colony was being built on Eden's Gate, rising from the ashes of the old one. Families from Earth and other human worlds were settling there, determined to prove that what had been destroyed could be rebuilt. Daniel oversaw the defense of the new settlement, ensuring that no one would ever attack it again. He spent his free time in the memorial garden, reading names and remembering faces. He had failed to save these people, and he would carry that weight for the rest of his life. But he could protect the ones who came after. That would have to be enough. On the anniversary of the massacre, Admiral Kevin Brooks addressed humanity in a broadcast that was watched by billions. He stood before the memorial wall on Eden's Gate, his uniform decorated with medals he had never asked for. "1 year ago," he said, "we learned what it means to be alone. We learned that the universe does not care about justice or fairness or mercy. We learned that the only protection we can count on is the protection we provide ourselves." He paused, looking at the camera with eyes that had seen too much death. "But we also learned something else. We learned that strength without compassion is tyranny. We learned that vengeance without limits becomes the very evil it claims to oppose. We chose a different path. We delivered justice, but we also showed mercy. We proved that humans can be the most dangerous species in the galaxy, but we also proved that we do not want to be." His voice grew stronger. "To the 40,000 souls we lost, I say this. We have not forgotten you. We will never forget you. Your names are carved in stone and planted in flowers and written in the hearts of every human who draws breath. You are why we fight. You are why we show kindness. You are why we refuse to become the monsters our enemies expected us to be." He looked up at the sky, where stars were beginning to appear in the darkening evening. "And to the galaxy, I say this. We are humanity. We come in peace, but we are prepared for war. We offer friendship to all who treat us fairly, We offer protection to all who cannot protect themselves. And we offer a promise to anyone who thinks of harming our people. His final words echoed across human space and beyond, heard by billions of beings on thousands of worlds. Do not wake the humans. The broadcast ended. People returned to their lives, their work, their families. But the message remained, spreading from system to system, translated into hundreds of languages. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors or victims, but as something new. Guardians who could destroy but chose to protect. Warriors who could hate but chose to love. The galaxy would never see them the same way again, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the 40,000 souls of Eden's Gate finally rested in peace, knowing that their deaths had changed the universe forever.